Just tacking this rear section up is proving to be somewhat difficult. And the difficulty is that I'm not a contortionist. Trying to get in the car and turn backwards and staple it up is difficult enough. But also the where it's got to be stapled, in around the corners here in particular, it's very hard to get it to sit properly. So I've actually had to staple it on and remove the staples and restaple and so on. So it's a continuing effort. But what is also apparent is that the cover piece that goes between this section and the bottom section also helps to tension the cloth. So the pieces that I've got here, let's try and put it there. This piece here is the cover piece that goes across the back. This is just the passenger side, and there's the equivalent of that on the driver's side. Now, I'll just try and position this up here. This wide section here goes along around in here. Now, when that's up in position, it helps push the material up and provide tension. So it's very difficult when you're trying to staple it up to work out whether you've got it right or it needs to go further. But when I've been putting this in position as well, it seems to be tensioning it and taking any of the wrinkles out. So it's a long process. I've spent hours just getting this far, and it's going to be a lot more to make sure that when I've stapled it and this is in position, that it's actually tensioning correctly. Now, I've also I still haven't put the rear window in. I'm waiting on a seal for that, and that's got a cover piece as well. So I've probably got to put this cover piece on, just screw it up in position so I can work out the position for this piece. Once again, the cover pieces are a bit of a jigsaw, but they're important to help provide tension to the roof lining. Where do I go from here? I'm just looking at this piece was nailed in, of course, originally, and the bit like the cover piece up in here, the nails were done through the material. Now I can't do that with the material I'm using, as I've already said before. So I've got to screw this on. Now I've seen other cars where it has been screwed on it, but I've also got to work out where I've got to put the screws and make sure that I'm screwing it into timber. So this is another problem I've got. I'll probably have to just screw the bare timber in along, just to make sure I've got the right places to screw it into. Otherwise I can't tell where the timber is underneath. The other thing I've got to decide is whether I have this as one piece. Now, it was on as one piece of cloth covered timber, even though that it was made of two separate pieces and they weren't joined. So the cloth just covered them, and I think they used that so they could position one side and then push the other side into position. Now, I don't know whether I'll do that or just have it as two separate cover pieces. The problem with the two separate cover pieces is that we'll have a little short join in the centre of the window. I'll think about that. It would be easier if I have two separate pieces, because as I say, it's bad enough trying to staple that up, because there's nowhere you can actually kneel, and I'm not flexible enough to bend my body and twist it around, so it would be easier for me to do it in two separate pieces and screw it up. Trying to manipulate the whole piece of timber on my own, and doing it when I'm not 20 years of age and flexible would make it extremely difficult. So I'm tending to think I'll do it in two pieces, but I'll think on that for a bit. But at this stage what I'll do is I'll screw this piece up, because these other cover pieces sit on top of that, so I've got to put that up so I know where the timber is going to sit, and that will then allow me to work out where I've got to screw through. And I'll probably screw the bare cover piece on just to make sure that everything is right before I finish stapling it and before I work on these side covers here. So there's a lot more to do, even though it's just a simple thing of putting the one small piece of headlining on the rear of the car. Not quite that easy. I've just put this filler piece in. That's half of it. It's only tacked in with a few nails. It needs to be screwed so it's tight against the headlining. So at the moment it's not pushing back into the top of the headlining to provide tension. So what I'm going to do is to, just with the bare timber there, I'm going to look at where I'm going to screw that. So there'll be quite a few screws to provide the necessary tension. Now it was originally multiply nailed all the way around, which I can't do with the material I'm using, but so I'll have to put probably more screws than I want, and it's really so that that timber pushes back. It's only a very thin piece of timber, and if I only sort of put a screw there and a screw there, the middle bit is not going to provide any tension against the roof lining. So I'll be doing that next. So I'll just go along, and with that being only tacked, I can actually work out where the timber is underneath it that I'm going to screw into. So, and also I can position exactly where I need to put the screw to provide the required tension. So that's what I intend to do. Once I've done that, and if that seems to work, then I'll come round the other side and do this side. I've put the cover strip around the window, and the reason for that, as I mentioned, is to get the right height for that. So once I find the screw points for this, when I finally assemble it, it will actually fit. One will fit over the other. Still waiting on the rear seal. Hopefully it'll arrive in the next week or two, so I can put this window in. But at this stage I really don't need the window in. I still need to finish this headlining strip. Right, I've just managed to get the other trim piece into position, this one here. I'm going to have to add a little bit of timber to the front end there. So that basically fits. I've put the fixing screw holes in the timber to make sure that when I put it up it'll actually screw into the timber behind. So that's fine. So what I'll be doing now is to take this trim piece down. I'll trim off the headlining there, and then I'll start to drop the cloth down to the top of the rear seat. Now basically the headlining is finished. This trim piece will add tension to that when I finish that, but At this stage I'm not putting that in. I'll drop this material down here. There's also some of the material goes down in behind these D pieces, so I'll be putting this material in and I'll cover these pieces, and I'll leave this one to last because it still may require some adjustment. So it's proceeding reasonably well. Still haven't got the rear window in yet, still waiting on the seal, but hopefully it'll be arriving this week. Right, I've just managed to get the other trim piece into position, this one here. I'm going to have to add a little bit of timber to the front end there. So that basically fits. I've put the fixing screw holes in the timber to make sure that when I put it up it'll actually screw into the timber behind. So that's fine. So what I'll be doing now is to take this trim piece down. I'll trim off the head lining there, and then I'll start to drop the cloth down to the top of the rear seat. Now basically the head lining is finished. This trim piece will add tension to that when I finish that, but at this stage I'm not putting that in. I'll drop this material down here. There's also some of the material goes down in behind these D pieces, so I'll be putting this material in and I'll cover these pieces, and I'll leave this one to last because it still may require some adjustment. So it's proceeding reasonably well. Still haven't got the rear window in yet, still waiting on the seal, but hopefully it'll be arriving this week. Now this horrible mess is actually the piece that goes alongside the rear window and up to the head lining. That's the join with the head lining. That's where the rear window is. And this piece here comes down behind the rear seat, the back of the rear seat. This curve here, or what's left of it, goes around the side window, the D window. Now I actually have the left and the right. This is the driver's side. They're both in poor condition. It's a vinyl. I'm doing it with cloth, slightly different colour from the head lining, more grey than the head lining. So what I'm about to do is to use this template. Now it's not a complete template, there are pieces missing, pieces on the end here and up the top there that was longer than that, and this piece is just all missing. So I'll cut it oversize and hopefully I can get it in. Now it doesn't go in the way I thought it should have gone in. It's tacked along the top where the head lining is, and it's tacked around the rear window and tacked around the side window. But I thought it actually came down and tacked it on the piece of timber that runs around on top of what I'll call the parcel shelf area at the behind the rear seat. It doesn't actually tack in there at all. It is actually pulled down. It's tacked on the curved timber on the roof line, then it's pulled down onto that parcel shelf area and glued. Now this was all glued on. That's where it was glued onto the back of the seat. So it actually pulls down towards the rear seat. It doesn't actually curve with the body line around the where that timber is on the parcel shelf area. So It's a bit unusual the way it goes. I'm not sure how it's going to go to actually tension it properly, but first thing first is to cut out enough material so I've got enough to get it in place and do some adjustments. So that's what I intend to do. I'll start with this one. I'm working on the driver's side first and see if I can get that in place. Getting this material in place is pretty much trial and error. I've just put a few staples in to try and see how the fit is, and I've had to actually pull some out and redo it. It's getting closer. The cloth, what I'm trying to achieve is no folds or bulges in the cloth, which is not easy considering how it's stapled in. It's got to be stapled in around the window, rear window there, obviously along the top, and the bottom end is glued, so it doesn't push right back into the timber at the back, and that's basically the key to getting it as a smooth piece of material when it's positioned. I've almost got it right in terms of where it sits at the top, and then I've got to fold that material around so it sort of comes in around the window here, and that's where it'll also staple or staple up in through there. But to do that I will have to trim this material back a bit more and probably put some cuts in it so I can fold it around the curve. Now it has to staple on the inside. It would be easier, of course, if it's stapled on the outside of the timber, but then you'd see the staples. So the piece of timber, cloth covered timber that goes in here will, a bit hard to do this, but that staples in there, and then that cloth covered material comes in over the top of that. So I've got a bit more work to do before I can actually finalise any staples. At this stage I'm thinking of leaving the gluing till last. Now this is meant to be glued straight onto the back there, but it's also glued up in the top there. So I won't do that until I've got the position as close as I can get it. And also I've got to trim it off. It's, as I mentioned, it's cut oversize, and just as well I did, because I'm having to move it to get the right fit. So I'm not there yet. It's going to take quite a lot more time to get it close. And the other thing is I've got the cover piece that comes around here and pushes the headlining back up in there. Now that's hanging down a bit, but when that timber is in there, it pushes that back. It will also place some tension on this as well. The amount of tension I'm not too sure, but I'm hoping I won't need much tension on this bottom piece. Anyway, I'll keep working away at it. As I say, it's getting closer, but it's not quite right yet. I think I've finally got the right shape in. The cloth seems to pull correctly. I'll just check and put the cover piece up and see if it makes any difference. I think it will take any small imperfection out. So what I ended up doing is gluing the top of that first and then pulling it up and positioning it. So it seemed to work well that way, and then I finished gluing that one on. I glued the side piece on there. The as I say, seems to fit quite okay. The timbers, I've just put them there to make sure everything's covered. They're not permanently in place yet, and I'm just working out how I need to cover this to make sure everything is sealed up. So this will be the next piece I'll cover and put that in before I do any finished trimming on the side piece here.